What if I told you that deep within the most violent forces on Earth, forces that have shaped continents and ended civilizations, there exists a phenomenon so rare, so spectacular, that witnessing it feels like watching the planet's nervous system fire in real time? Imagine a towering column of ash erupts from the Earth, climbing miles into the atmosphere, and then, impossibly, the darkness ignites. Not from above, from within. Lightning tears through the volcanic plume itself, bolt after bolt, branching like veins of electricity through a storm that has no clouds, no rain, only chaos and fire. This is not ordinary lightning. This is something older, something primal. In 2010, when Eyjafjallajökull erupted in Iceland, photographers captured something that defied explanation: brilliant arcs of electricity dancing through billowing ash, illuminating the darkness with fractal patterns that seemed almost alive. Scientists who studied the images found themselves confronting a fundamental question. How does lightning form without water droplets, without the familiar mechanisms of thunderstorms? What they discovered challenged our understanding of electrical phenomena, atmospheric physics, and the very nature of eruptions themselves. Today, we journey through evidence that challenges everything we thought we knew about volcanoes, lightning, and the violent intersections where Earth's interior meets its atmosphere. Prepare yourselves. We begin.
March 20th, 2010. Southern Iceland. A fissure opened beneath the ice cap of Eyjafjallajökull, a volcano whose name most of the world couldn't pronounce but would never forget. Within hours, the eruption transformed from a localized event into something that would ground air traffic across Europe for weeks. But it wasn't the ash plume's reach that stunned volcanologists. It was what happened inside it. Photographer Sigurdur Stephenson stood 8 kilometers from the eruption, his camera trained on the billowing darkness. What he captured that night would become one of the most iconic images in modern volcanology. A massive electrical storm raging within the volcanic plume itself. Lightning, dozens of bolts per second, tearing through the ash with an intensity that rivaled the most powerful thunderstorms ever recorded. Except, this wasn't a thunderstorm. There were no rain clouds, no ice crystals colliding in updrafts, no conventional meteorological explanation for what was generating such staggering electrical activity. Dr. Sonja Benke, an atmospheric physicist who specialized in lightning phenomena, reviewed the footage with growing unease. Every textbook tells us lightning requires specific conditions: charge separation in ice particles, vertical development in cumulonimbus clouds. The Eyjafjallajökull eruption had none of these prerequisites, and yet the electrical discharge was orders of magnitude more intense than anything we'd observed in nature.
This wasn't the first time volcanic lightning had been observed. Far from it. In 79 CE, Pliny the Younger watched Mount Vesuvius destroy Pompeii and Herculaneum. His written account describes a fearful black cloud, rent by forked and quivering bursts of flame. For nearly 2 millennia, historians assumed this was poetic embellishment. They were wrong. When Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, researchers documented electrical discharges visible even in daylight. The 1991 eruption of Mount Pinatubo in the Philippines generated lightning visible from hundreds of kilometers away. In 2008, the explosive eruption of Chaitén in Chile produced what witnesses described as a web of electricity encompassing the entire ash column. But these observations remained largely anecdotal, dramatic photographs and eyewitness accounts without the scientific instrumentation needed to understand what was actually occurring. That changed in 2006.
Japan's Sakurajima volcano erupts, on average, 800 times per year. This makes it one of the most active volcanoes on Earth and the perfect natural laboratory for studying eruptive phenomena. Dr. Takeshi Miura from Kagoshima University installed an array of specialized instruments around Sakurajima's crater. High-speed cameras capable of capturing 10,000 frames per second, radio frequency detectors, and sophisticated electrical field sensors. What they recorded revolutionized our understanding. During an eruption sequence in February 2013, Miura's instruments detected something extraordinary. Electrical discharges were occurring not just in the main ash plume, but in discrete stages, each with distinct characteristics. Near the vent, within the first 100 meters of the eruption, instruments recorded what Miura called vent lightning, rapid, high-frequency discharges occurring within dense ash concentrations. These were small, localized events, barely visible to the naked eye. Higher in the plume, between 1 and 5 kilometers altitude, a different phenomenon emerged: plume lightning, the spectacular bolts captured in photographs. These discharges reached lengths of several kilometers, carrying currents comparable to major thunderstorms. But the most puzzling discovery involved what happened before the visible eruption. Miura's electrical field sensors detected anomalous readings minutes, sometimes hours before ash reached the surface. The volcanic conduit itself was becoming electrically charged during the initial phases of magma fragmentation. The volcano was essentially building a gigantic capacitor, Miura explained, and when it discharged, the release was catastrophic. The question that emerged from these observations was profound. How does ash, essentially pulverized rock, generate electrical charges powerful enough to create lightning? Traditional thunderstorm lightning occurs through well-understood mechanisms. Water droplets and ice crystals collide within turbulent updrafts. Light particles carry positive charges upward, heavy particles carry negative charges downward. When the separation becomes sufficient, the insulating capacity of air breaks down and lightning occurs. But volcanic ash is not water. It's solid particulate matter with fundamentally different properties. Some researchers proposed that ash particles collided similarly to ice crystals, generating static electricity through friction, a process called triboelectrification. But calculations showed this mechanism alone couldn't account for the observed discharge intensities. Others suggested chemical reactions during the eruption released ions into the plume. But this raised another question. Why would chemical processes generate the organized branching structure characteristic of lightning? The most troubling possibility was that something about the eruption process itself, something fundamental to how magma transforms into ash, was creating electrical phenomena we didn't fully understand. As Dr. Benke put it, we were observing electrical behavior that shouldn't be possible, which meant either our instruments were wrong, our physics was wrong, or something remarkable was happening inside these eruptions that we'd completely overlooked. But the evidence forces us to confront an uncomfortable possibility, that volcanic eruptions are not simply geological events, but electrical phenomena of staggering complexity. Phenomena that might fundamentally reshape our understanding of how Earth's interior communicates with its atmosphere. To understand volcanic lightning, we must first understand what happens in the milliseconds after magma reaches the surface. Beneath the Earth, magma exists under tremendous pressure, thousands of atmospheres compressing volatile gases into liquid solution. When this magma rises through volcanic conduits and reaches the surface, the pressure drops catastrophically. What happens next is violent beyond comprehension. Dissolved gases, primarily water vapor, carbon dioxide, and sulfur dioxide, instantly vaporize, expanding with explosive force. This expansion shatters the magma into billions of fragments, each particle cooling from temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius to a solid state in milliseconds. Dr. Alexa Van Eaton, a volcanologist at the U.S. Geological Survey, conducted experiments replicating this process in laboratory conditions. Using high-speed imaging and specialized pressure chambers, her team observed the fragmentation process at unprecedented resolution. "We found that fragmentation isn't random," Van Eaton explains. "The particles fracture along crystalline boundaries, creating irregular surfaces with extraordinary surface area. Every single ash particle, and we're talking about particles measured in microns, has a complex topology of ridges, valleys, and sharp edges. This topology matters because it dramatically increases surface interaction. When billions of these particles collide within the eruption column, traveling at velocities exceeding 100 meters per second, the collective friction generates staggering amounts of static electricity. Van Eaton's measurements indicated that a single cubic meter of dense ash could accumulate charge densities comparable to the most powerful capacitors humans have ever engineered. But this was just the beginning." In 2015, Dr. Joseph Dufek at the University of Oregon proposed a radical mechanism. The eruption itself might be fracturing water molecules. When magma fragments, the violence of the process generates shock waves through any residual water vapor. These shock waves, Dufek theorized, could be energetic enough to actually split H2O molecules, separating hydrogen from oxygen ions. This process, called hydrofracture, would instantly create enormous quantities of charged particles. The hydrogen ions, positive, would be carried upward by the eruption's kinetic energy, while heavier oxygen ions, negative, would concentrate in denser regions of the plume. Dufek's team tested this hypothesis using mass spectrometry analysis of ash collected immediately after eruptions. They found elevated concentrations of molecular hydrogen, H2 gas, that shouldn't exist in volcanic plumes if conventional chemistry was the only mechanism at work. The hydrogen signatures we detected suggested approximately 0.3% of water molecules in the plume were being split, Dufek noted. That might sound minimal, but given the volume of water vapor in a typical Plinian eruption, we're talking about generating 10 to the 15th charged particles per second. To put that in perspective, that's roughly equivalent to the electrical output of every power plant on Earth, all discharging simultaneously. Volcanic lightning produces radio frequency emissions, electromagnetic radiation that propagates at the speed of light in all directions. Dr. Paul Krehbiel, a lightning physicist at New Mexico Tech, deployed specialized radio receivers around active volcanoes to map these emissions in 3 dimensions. What his instruments revealed was extraordinary. During a 2013 eruption of Mount Redoubt in Alaska, Krehbiel's array detected over 300 electrical discharges per second, most of them completely invisible to the naked eye. The radio mapping showed these discharges forming complex interconnected networks within the ash plume. "We expected to see discrete bolts, individual lightning strikes like those in thunderstorms," Krehbiel recalls. "Instead, we found continuous electrical activity forming what can only be described as a plasma network. The entire plume was electrically alive." More remarkably, the radio frequencies suggested discharge mechanisms fundamentally different from atmospheric lightning. Conventional lightning produces specific frequency peaks corresponding to channel formation and ionization. Volcanic lightning produced a continuous spectrum, what physicists call broadband emission, indicating multiple simultaneous discharge processes. Researchers detected radio signatures at frequencies ranging from 1 kHz to 300 MHz. This enormous range suggested electrical activity occurring at scales from centimeters to kilometers, from microscopic spark discharges between individual ash particles to megavolt arcs spanning the entire eruption column. But perhaps most intriguingly, Krehbiel's instruments detected pre-eruption radio anomalies. Hours before visible ash reached the surface, his receivers registered electromagnetic noise consistent with charge accumulation deep within the volcanic conduit. The mountain was becoming electrically active before the eruption, suggesting the fragmentation process itself, occurring kilometers underground, was generating electrical phenomena. This pattern would repeat at every eruption they monitored. First, the underground radio signature, then vent lightning, finally the spectacular plume discharges photographed from miles away. But this represents just one piece of a much larger puzzle. As instrumentation improved, researchers made an unsettling discovery. The most intense electrical activity didn't correlate with ash density or eruption magnitude in the ways they'd predicted. Dr. Corrado Cimarelli at Ludwig Maximilian University in Munich built a specialized laboratory apparatus, a vertical shock tube that could replicate volcanic eruption conditions. By controlling particle size, velocity, and concentration independently, Cimarelli's team could isolate individual variables. Their findings contradicted conventional wisdom. The most powerful electrical discharges didn't occur in the densest ash concentrations. They occurred at specific particle size distributions, specifically when the ash contained a bimodal distribution of very fine particles, under 10 microns, mixed with larger fragments, 100 to 500 microns. This makes no intuitive sense, Cimarelli admits. Traditional triboelectric theory suggests uniform particle sizes should generate maximum charge separation, but volcanic plumes behave completely differently. The explanation, when it emerged, was remarkable. Fine particles, essentially volcanic dust, have enormous surface area relative to their mass. These particles charge rapidly through friction and become highly mobile within the plume's turbulent dynamics. They act as charge carriers. Larger particles, by contrast, have less surface area but far greater mass. They resist turbulent motion, creating stable regions within the plume. They act as charge collectors. The interaction between mobile charge carriers and stationary charge collectors creates what physicists call a charge separation cascade, an accelerating process where initial small discharges mobilize more particles, which generate more discharges, which mobilize still more particles. It's a runaway electrical feedback loop occurring within volcanic ash. In 2011, researchers studying the Grímsvötn eruption in Iceland, a volcano erupting beneath a massive ice sheet, discovered something that seemed to defy physics. The eruption melted enormous quantities of ice, generating colossal amounts of steam. Conventional models predicted this water vapor would suppress electrical activity by increasing atmospheric conductivity, essentially short-circuiting the charge accumulation. The opposite happened. The Grímsvötn eruption produced the most intense lightning storm ever documented at a volcano, over 1,200 discharges per minute at peak activity. The addition of water vapors somehow enhanced electrical discharge rather than suppressing it. Dr. Sonja Benke's investigation revealed why. When volcanic heat flash vaporizes ice, the transition occurs so rapidly that water molecules don't have time to equilibrate thermally. The resulting steam contains a population of superheated molecules, water vapor existing above its normal boiling point, trapped in a metastable state. This superheated steam interacting with ash particles creates surface chemistry that dramatically enhances charge transfer. In essence, the water molecules act as microscopic capacitors, storing electrical energy on particle surfaces. But there was more. Analysis of ash samples from ice contact eruptions revealed unique mineralogical alterations. The ash glass showed microscopic fracture patterns consistent with electrical arcing, evidence that individual particles had experienced voltage differentials exceeding 10,000 volts. We found fusion marks, Benke explains, microscopic spots where the electrical discharge was intense enough to melt the particle surface. These are signatures of electrical phenomena far more extreme than anything observed in thunderstorms. In 2018, researchers examining high-speed footage from the 2015 Calbuco eruption in Chile noticed something impossible. Frame-by-frame analysis revealed lightning bolts propagating downward from the ash plume toward the volcanic vent. This contradicted everything known about lightning physics. Conventional lightning travels from regions of high negative charge toward regions of positive charge, or ground. In thunderstorms, this typically means cloud-to-ground strikes traveling downward or ground-to-cloud strikes traveling upward. But volcanic lightning at Calbuco was doing both simultaneously, and the downward propagating bolts were initiating in the middle of the plume, traveling toward the eruption source. Dr. Van Eaton's team conducted electrical field mapping to understand this phenomenon. What they discovered was profound. The volcanic vent itself was maintaining a massive positive charge. Deep within the conduit, the violent fragmentation of magma was separating charges in a very specific way. Heavy, negatively charged particles remained close to the vent, pulled downward by gravity. Light, positively charged particles were ejected upward into the plume. This created an inverted electrical structure: positive charges above, negative charges below, exactly opposite to thunderstorm structure. The volcano had essentially become a giant electrical dipole, Van Eaton explains, and it was powerful enough to drive lightning in directions we'd never observed before. But the implications extended further. If volcanic conduits accumulate charge during eruptions, this electrical activity might influence the eruption itself, not just as a byproduct, but as an active force shaping eruptive behavior. Laboratory experiments demonstrated that strong electrical fields can influence particle trajectories, alter fragmentation patterns, and even affect gas bubble nucleation in magma. The possibility emerged that volcanic lightning wasn't just a consequence of eruptions, it might be integral to how eruptions evolve. The evidence extends beyond simple electrical discharge into the realm of fundamental volcanic physics, suggesting that electricity and magnetism play roles in eruptive processes that we've only begun to understand.
By 2020, disparate observations were converging toward a comprehensive framework. Dr. Alexa Van Eaton, working with an international team of volcanologists, physicists, and atmospheric scientists, published what's now considered the foundational paper on volcanic electrification mechanisms. The theory integrates multiple processes occurring across different scales and timescales. The framework describes volcanic lightning as occurring in 4 distinct phases. Phase 1. Deep fragmentation. Kilometers below the surface, ascending magma begins fragmenting as dissolved gases exsolve. This initial fragmentation generates the first electrical charges through mechanical fracture of crystals, a process called fracto-emission, where breaking chemical bonds releases electrons. This deep electrical activity produces the pre-eruption radio signals detected by Krehbiel's instruments. Phase 2. Explosive decompression. As magma reaches the surface, explosive decompression shatters it into billions of particles. The violence of this fragmentation creates the primary charge separation through 3 simultaneous mechanisms: triboelectrification, friction, hydrofracture, water molecule splitting, and surface ionization, high-temperature chemical reactions stripping electrons from particle surfaces. Phase 3. Turbulent mixing. Within the eruption column, turbulent mixing creates regions of extreme charge density. Fine particles concentrate positive charges, coarse particles concentrate negative charges. When these regions interact, the electrical potential exceeds air's dielectric breakdown threshold, approximately 3 million volts per meter, and lightning initiates. Phase 4. Plume evolution. As the plume rises and disperses, electrical activity transitions from frequent small discharges near the vent to less frequent but more powerful discharges higher in the plume. Eventually, the ash dilutes sufficiently that electrical activity ceases, though charge can persist on particles for hours, occasionally producing lightning from dispersing ash clouds dozens of kilometers from the volcano. This framework explained observations from dozens of eruptions across different volcano types, magma compositions, and eruptive styles. But it also raised profound questions about what else we might have overlooked.
Not all researchers accepted Van Eaton's unified framework. Dr. James Gilmore at MIT proposed an alternative hypothesis, that volcanic lightning results primarily from radioactive decay. Magma contains trace amounts of radioactive elements, uranium, thorium, potassium-40, that emit ionizing radiation. Gilmore suggested this radiation might ionize gases in the eruption column, creating conductive pathways that facilitate electrical discharge. While radioactivity undoubtedly contributes some ionization, calculations showed it was insufficient to account for observed discharge intensities. The debate continues, but most researchers now view radioactivity as a secondary effect rather than the primary mechanism. More controversially, Dr. Hiroshi Kikuchi in Japan proposed that volcanic lightning might influence magma behavior through electromagnetic forces. If eruption conduits accumulate significant electrical charge, the resulting electromagnetic fields could theoretically affect magma flow, crystal alignment, and even gas bubble migration. This hypothesis remains highly speculative, requiring electromagnetic field strengths that may not be physically achievable in volcanic conduits, but laboratory experiments have demonstrated that strong magnetic fields can influence molten rock behavior, suggesting the possibility merits investigation. Beyond the physics lies a more profound realization. Volcanoes are not simply holes in the ground releasing hot rock. They are complex systems where solid, liquid, and gas phases interact with electromagnetic fields to produce phenomena we're only beginning to understand. This forces us to reconsider fundamental assumptions about volcanic processes, assumptions that have guided volcanology for decades. We've traditionally conceptualized eruptions as mechanical and thermal events. Pressure builds, magma rises, gases expand, rock fractures. The role of electromagnetic phenomena was considered peripheral. Interesting, perhaps, but not fundamental. The volcanic lightning research suggests otherwise. Electrical and magnetic forces operate at every scale of volcanic activity, from molecular interactions on particle surfaces to megavolt arcs spanning kilometers. These forces may influence fragmentation efficiency, ash dispersal patterns, and even eruption duration. Dr. Van Eaton frames it this way. We've been studying volcanoes with one eye closed. We've measured pressure, temperature, chemistry, and deformation, but we've largely ignored the electrical dimension. Now we're realizing that electrical phenomena aren't just byproducts, they're integral to how volcanoes behave. This recognition parallels other paradigm shifts in Earth science, the acceptance of plate tectonics, the discovery of mantle plumes, the recognition of impact events as agents of extinction. Each required abandoning comfortable assumptions and embracing complexity. The practical implications are immediate and profound. If volcanic conduits accumulate electrical charge before eruptions produce visible ash, then electromagnetic monitoring might provide earlier eruption warnings than traditional seismic methods. Several volcanic observatories are now implementing electromagnetic monitoring systems. Japan's meteorological agency has installed electrical field sensors at Sakurajima, Aso, and Mount Asama. The Alaska Volcano Observatory deployed radio frequency receivers at multiple volcanoes around Cook Inlet. Early results are promising. During a 2021 eruption sequence at Semeru volcano in Indonesia, electromagnetic anomalies preceded seismic signals by 8 to 12 minutes, potentially providing critical additional warning time for nearby communities. But challenges remain. Volcanic environments are electromagnetically noisy. Thunderstorms, industrial interference, and Earth's natural electrical activity all produce signals that must be distinguished from genuine volcanic precursors. Developing reliable detection algorithms requires understanding electromagnetic signatures from many eruptions across different volcano types. Dr. Stephen McNutt at the University of South Florida leads a project developing machine learning algorithms to identify volcanic electromagnetic precursors. We're training neural networks on data from dozens of eruptions, McNutt explains. The goal is automated detection systems that can alert volcanologists to anomalous electromagnetic activity in real time. If successful, electromagnetic monitoring could transform volcanic hazard assessment, providing insights into volcanic dynamics impossible to obtain through traditional methods. Volcanic ash poses catastrophic risks to aircraft. Abrasive particles erode engine components, molten ash adheres to turbine blades, and fine particles contaminate avionics. The 2010 Eyjafjallajökull eruption demonstrated these risks, grounding 100,000 flights and costing airlines approximately $1.7 billion. Current ash detection relies primarily on satellite imagery and dispersion models, but these methods have limitations. Satellites can't see through meteorological clouds, and models struggle with rapidly changing eruption intensities. The discovery that electrically charged ash behaves differently from neutral ash opens new detection possibilities. Dr. Tamsin Mather at Oxford University demonstrated that charged ash particles aggregate differently, forming larger, denser clusters that settle faster than predictions based on particle size alone would suggest. Electrostatic forces can dominate gravitational settling for particles under 20 microns, Mather explains. This fundamentally changes ash cloud evolution. Understanding electrical charge distributions in ash clouds could improve forecast accuracy, potentially reducing airspace closures while maintaining safety margins. But there's a more radical possibility: using electromagnetic pulses to deliberately discharge ash clouds, causing particles to aggregate and fall out rapidly, essentially defusing the volcanic lightning bomb before it threatens aviation. This concept remains purely theoretical, requiring electromagnetic field generators far beyond current technology. But, as Dr. Mather notes, 50 years ago, weather modification seemed like science fiction. Now we routinely seed clouds to enhance rainfall. Who knows what might be possible in another 50 years? Volcanic eruptions inject enormous quantities of gases and particles into the atmosphere. Large, explosive eruptions can influence global climate for years. The 1991 Pinatubo eruption cooled global temperatures by approximately 0.5 degrees Celsius. But electrical phenomena during eruptions might amplify or alter these climate effects in unexpected ways. Lightning produces nitrogen oxides, reactive molecules that influence atmospheric chemistry. Volcanic lightning, occurring in ash-rich, sulfur-rich environments, produces nitrogen oxides that interact with volcanic gases to form unusual chemical species. Dr. Emma Liu at University College London studies these interactions. Her research shows volcanic lightning generates nitrogen oxide concentrations 10 to 100 times higher than predicted by conventional photochemical models. These nitrogen oxides react with sulfur dioxide to form sulfate aerosols, Liu explains. These aerosols reflect sunlight, contributing to cooling effects. But they also serve as condensation nuclei for cloud formation, potentially altering precipitation patterns. The implications extend to understanding ancient eruptions. Ice core records preserve evidence of historical volcanic activity through sulfate layers. But if electrical activity during eruptions significantly alters atmospheric chemistry, ice core interpretations might need revision. More speculatively, electrical phenomena during massive eruptions in Earth's geological past, events like the Siberian traps 252 million years ago or the Deccan traps 66 million years ago, might have produced atmospheric effects we've completely overlooked. These eruptions released magma volumes measured in millions of cubic kilometers over millennia. If they generated electrical phenomena proportional to modern eruptions, the cumulative electrical energy would have been staggering, potentially influencing atmospheric chemistry in ways we can only begin to imagine. Recent breakthroughs suggest we're approaching a threshold where volcanic electrical monitoring transitions from research curiosity to operational necessity, where understanding these phenomena becomes essential not just for scientific insight, but for protecting aircraft, forecasting climate impacts, and safeguarding communities living in volcano-threatened regions.
Here we enter territory where science confronts philosophy. The electromagnetic networks detected within volcanic plumes, complex, dynamic, self-organizing structures responding to environmental conditions, display characteristics that, in other contexts, we might associate with information processing. Dr. Michael Manga at UC Berkeley, a scientist not prone to speculation, nevertheless asks, when we observe these self-organizing electrical patterns, patterns that exhibit feedback loops and respond to perturbations in apparently adaptive ways, what exactly are we looking at? This isn't suggesting volcanoes are conscious, that would be absurd anthropomorphism, but it raises genuine questions about how we define complex systems. The electrical networks in volcanic plumes share mathematical properties with neural networks, hierarchical organization, distributed processing, emergent behavior that can't be predicted from component interactions alone. Computer scientists studying the radio frequency data have applied network analysis tools typically used for studying brain activity and found striking structural similarities. The plume isn't computing anything, Manga emphasizes, but it is processing information, converting thermal and mechanical energy into organized electromagnetic structures. That's fundamentally what information processing is. This perspective suggests volcanic eruptions might be understood not just as physical phenomena, but as information phenomena. Events where the Earth's interior communicates with its atmosphere through electromagnetic languages we're only beginning to decode.
The recognition that volcanic eruptions generate powerful electromagnetic phenomena forces us to reconsider their role in Earth's history, particularly during mass extinction events associated with massive volcanism. The end Permian extinction, 252 million years ago, the most catastrophic extinction in Earth's history, eliminating over 90% of marine species, coincided with the Siberian Traps eruptions. Conventional explanations focus on toxic gases, acid rain, and greenhouse warming. But what if electromagnetic phenomena played an unrecognized role? Dr. Paul Wignall at the University of Leeds studies extinction patterns in the fossil record. He notes peculiar features of the end Permian event. The extinction occurred in pulses, rapid die-offs separated by partial recovery periods. The pattern suggests environmental stresses beyond simple warming or toxicity. Electrical phenomena during the Siberian Traps eruptions, occurring episodically over hundreds of thousands of years, could have produced atmospheric effects we haven't considered. Intense electromagnetic fields might have disrupted animal navigation, interfered with photosynthesis through ionospheric disturbances, or produced ozone-destroying chemical species in unprecedented quantities. This remains speculative, but it exemplifies how understanding modern volcanic electrical phenomena opens new questions about Earth's deep past. Perhaps the most profound implication involves life itself. Stanley Miller's famous 1952 experiment demonstrated that electrical discharges through primitive atmospheres can synthesize amino acids, the building blocks of proteins. Scientists have long speculated that lightning played a role in life's chemical origins. But what if volcanic lightning, not atmospheric lightning, was the key? Dr. Sandra Piazzolo at the University of Leeds makes a compelling case. Early Earth experienced extraordinary volcanism, a molten surface gradually cooling, continents forming, and countless eruptions releasing gases that would become the atmosphere.
Atmospheric lightning requires water clouds, Piazzolo explains, but early Earth's atmosphere might have been too hot for liquid water clouds. Volcanic lightning, however, would have been ubiquitous, occurring whenever magma fragmented, regardless of atmospheric conditions. Volcanic eruptions also provide something atmospheric lightning cannot: concentrated chemical diversity. An eruption brings together water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, sulfur compounds, phosphorus, and metal ions, precisely the chemical inventory needed for prebiotic synthesis. Laboratory experiments simulating volcanic lightning in early Earth atmospheres produce not just amino acids, but nucleotides, components of RNA and DNA, at yields far exceeding atmospheric lightning experiments. The implication is staggering. The most profound implications emerge when we consider that the electrical phenomena we've observed in modern eruptions, the lightning we've photographed, measured, and begun to understand, might represent the same processes that first assembled the molecular machinery of life on a young volcanic Earth.
For all we've learned, profound mysteries remain. We still don't fully understand the deep fragmentation process, the moment when solid magma shatters into ash. Current theories suggest multiple mechanisms, but no single explanation accounts for all observations. The electrical signatures detected deep in volcanic conduits hint at processes we can't yet replicate in laboratories. We don't know why some eruptions produce spectacular lightning, while others, apparently similar, generate minimal electrical activity. Composition matters. Silica-rich magmas seem more electrically active, but exceptions exist. Something about eruption dynamics, perhaps related to magma ascent rate or fragmentation efficiency, influences electrical phenomena in ways we haven't identified. We don't understand the full extent to which electrical forces influence eruption evolution. If electromagnetic fields affect particle trajectories, gas exsolution, or magma flow, then our models of volcanic processes are missing fundamental physics. But quantifying these effects requires measurements impossible with current technology. And we don't know what happens at the absolute extremes, the supervolcanic eruptions that occur every 100,000 years or so, ejecting hundreds of cubic kilometers of magma. The electromagnetic phenomena during these cataclysmic events would dwarf anything observed historically. Their effects on the atmosphere, the ionosphere, and potentially Earth's magnetic field remain entirely speculative. Every answer raises new questions. Every measurement reveals additional complexity. But perhaps that's the point.
We began with a simple observation: lightning occurring where it shouldn't be possible. We end having traced electrical phenomena from microscopic fractures in crystalline minerals to megavolt arcs spanning kilometers, from mysterious radio emissions before eruptions to the possibility that these electrical processes influenced the very origin of life. The evidence shows that volcanic eruptions are far more than mechanical releases of pressure. They are electromagnetic events, complex, dynamic, self-organizing phenomena where Earth's interior communicates with its atmosphere through the ancient language of electricity. What we've learned: volcanic lightning results from multiple mechanisms: fragmentation, friction, chemical reactions, and possibly quantum processes at surfaces, operating simultaneously across vast ranges of scale. The electrical activity influences how eruptions evolve, how ash disperses, and potentially how volcanic hazards manifest. What remains unknown? The deep processes generating pre-eruption electromagnetic signals, the precise mechanisms controlling discharge intensities, the potential for electrical monitoring to improve eruption forecasting, and the role these phenomena might have played in Earth's history and life's emergence. The current scientific consensus recognizes volcanic electrical phenomena as integral to eruption dynamics, no longer a curiosity, but a fundamental aspect of how volcanoes behave.
But consensus is never the endpoint. It's the foundation for the next generation of questions. As we develop more sophisticated instrumentation, as we send electromagnetic sensors into active craters, as we map electrical fields in 3 dimensions during eruptions, as we simulate volcanic processes at quantum scales, our understanding will deepen. And with understanding comes wonder. Because what we're truly witnessing in volcanic lightning is Earth revealing its inner workings, showing us that even in its most violent moments, our planet operates according to principles of elegant complexity that bridge the smallest scales of matter with the grandest scales of atmosphere. The fire screams. The darkness ignites, and in those electric moments, we glimpse truths about our world that have been hiding in plain sight since the first volcano illuminated the ancient sky. The Earth is vast, the mysteries are endless, the journey continues.